Guys, I really tried. I approached Kadena with an open mind and was really hoping to get hyped up about it like I know many of y'all are. But the more I looked, the more red flags that I found, and ultimately I came away unimpressed. I mean, this was supposed to be a video in my Worth the Hype series, where I share both pros and cons about projects. But after doing my research, I felt that it would be a better fit as a My Contrarian View piece instead. So I made a last-second decision and put it there, alongside my critiques of Cardano and IOTA. As for this video, I'll start with a super brief overview of Kadena, then I'll go through each of my top 7 concerns. And then I'll wrap it all up with my final verdict. So if you're curious about Kadena or want to tell me why I'm wrong, then this video is for you. Strap in, my friend, and let's roll the intro. Before we dive in, I have 3 very important points I have to share with you. First, I've watched Invest Answers and BitBoy's videos on Kadena and saw a ton of criticism that their points were wrong or inaccurate. But just FYI, my points are going to be largely different from theirs. Second, this is a fundamentals focused channel. I won't be saying anything about price, especially for the short to midterm. KDA could continue to rocket. Don't use that against me because I'm not saying that it can't. And third, I am not being paid by Ethereum or Solana to FUD Kadena. I am a huge fan of those 2 projects and would love for them to sponsor me, but that is not the case, just for the record. Alright, so on to Kadena. It's yet another layer 1 blockchain that has claimed to solve the infamous blockchain trilemma. But one thing that's super unique is that they went with proof of work at a time when everyone else is going with proof of stake. It's not the same model as Bitcoin's though, because Kadena braids together multiple different chains that work in parallel to execute transactions. Their model is called chain web, and on the highest level, their approach is a form of sharding, which you might have heard of in Ethereum land before. Kadena claims that their architecture has no upper bound on how many transactions per second that it can support. They also created their own native smart contract language called Pact, which aims to improve on Solidity's flaws. Besides their public blockchain, they also have a private one called Kuro. And that's mainly for enterprise use cases, but it can also integrate with their public network as a sidechain. Finally, they have a native token called KDA, and is used to pay for gas on their network. Everything seems pretty normal so far, right? Well, I thought so too, but it's when I started digging deeper that I found some really worrisome points. Like their world-beating 480,000 transactions per second number that everyone likes to throw around. We see that shared all over social media in comparison tables like this one right here, or this graphic right here. But that number is incredibly disingenuous, because first, that is theoretical only. And second, it's based on combining the throughput of their private Kuro blockchain alongside their public layer 1 network. And that's not a fair way to compare in my mind. Don't just take my word for it though. Here is straight from their director of engineering in a Telegram AMA post. And I quote, "The 480K TPS number came from the notional configuration of having 2 of our Kuro private blockchains attached to each of the 20 public chains. But I would like to make an effort to state the distinction between that and the raw layer 1 TPS, which you can reasonably say is around 20x that of Bitcoin and Ethereum." See? Straight from the horse's mouth. I mean, 20x Bitcoin and Ethereum is good, but it's nowhere near the earth-shattering 480K TPS that everyone's throwing around. By the way, when I have criticisms, I always bring receipts. Go check out the description down below to see links to the raw sources that I mentioned across this video. Now, before my next major concern, I want to give a quick shout out to our video sponsors, Vauld. They are a crypto lending platform that gives you passive income on your coins, just like BlockFi or Celsius. But they offer notably higher yields, like 6.7% APY on BTC and ETH, compared to the usual 4 to 6% on other platforms. And for stablecoins, they offer almost 13% compared to the usual 5 to 10%. You get your payouts weekly, your interest compounds daily, and there's no fees, limits, or wait times for withdrawals. They also take security very seriously, which is why they have $100 million worth of BitGo insurance, as well as all sorts of powerful authentication and verification processes. With all these features and benefits, it should not be surprising that they are backed by some of the top funds in this space, like Pantera Capital, Coinbase Ventures, Gumi, and much more. For a limited time, they are offering 40% discount on trading fees and an extra 5% of interest forever. So if you already use crypto interest accounts, then why not check them out using my link down below. Alright, my next concern is that Kadena's braided architecture has some well-known limitations because it utilizes sharding. For example, their approach breaks something called atomic composability, which means that they won't be able to support certain types of DeFi apps. I'm not going to go too deep here because it gets quite technical, but you should Google Kadena atomic composability and read some of the top results if you want to learn more about this. Another issue with their braided architecture is that it increases the latency of the network and the time to finality. Because if you hold KDA, you actually have a different balance on each of the 20 chains. That's just how it's set up. Of course, you can move your coins across chains pretty easily, but the more chains that they add to the network, the longer it's going to take to fully transfer your coins across the network and settle. This is related to the diameter and the number of hops if you read their How to Scale a Proof of Work blockchain article. I want to be fair though, because some of these limitations also apply to other popular projects that utilize some form of sharding. Kadena is definitely not alone in this particular drawback, but still, I don't have to like it though. Anyways, the next thing that I'm concerned about is their mining. And the first thing I noticed is that you can only mine KDA with hefty ASIC miners. Per my research, those miners cost between $30,000 to $60,000 each, which is very unaffordable for your average community member who just wants to help out and secure the network. Ideally, they could have picked an algorithm that's more friendly to CPU or GPU miners because those are way more accessible. One big criticism of ASIC chains is that their hash rate becomes incredibly centralized because only a small number of whales can afford to mine. This is not just some crazy theory, by the way. We already see it happening in their hash rate distribution. Like this dashboard shows that their top mining pool, Poolflare, has over 70% of the overall network hash rate. That's quite ridiculous, and it means that they could do a double spend attack if they wanted to. Now, to be fair, the team is working to make it easier for people to mine without a pool, but we have yet to see that change the hash rate distribution. Now, my next concern has to do with their tokenomics, specifically high inflation and concentrated distribution. They pretty much have to have inflation because remember that Kadena's fees are like fractions of a penny. Because miners can't make any money from transaction fees, they have to be subsidized in some other way. And that other way is through token emissions. If we look at the details of their Medium article, there's around 2 million KDA being created each month to pay miners, which is around $20 million at time of shooting. This inflation is great for miners, but bad for holders because your share of the circulating supply is constantly being diluted. And not to mention that a good chunk of that KDA is likely going to be dumped on the market because miners gotta pay their bills somehow, right? As for the token distribution, a lot of people like to point out how it's super favorable to the community because insiders only get like 23% of the tokens. But we gotta take into account the fact that 70% of all tokens are for miner emissions, and that lasts for a 100-year period. Which means that if we just focus on the circulating supply right now, the team plus insiders own like 70% of that amount. Super centralized and quite concerning to me. But even besides inflation or distribution stuff, I'm worried about the long-term demand for the token itself. Like, you need KDA for 3 things: to send us payments through the network, to pay a fee for creating smart contracts, and to pay gas for executing smart contracts. But how much KDA do you even need for those use cases? Like, gas fees are so freaking small, you can probably send 1 million transactions for just $1 in fees. And Kadena introduced gas stations, which means that Dapps developers pay for the gas fees instead of us end users. My whole point here is that we don't even need to buy that much KDA in order to use their network, which leaves speculation as the main source of demand. And if that's the case, that is not good for long-term price prospects in my honest opinion. You need strong sources of demand built in the system in order for the token price to do well. The next thing I'm concerned about is that their team is just average. Well, their founders who ran JP Morgan's blockchain team are pretty great, plus their advisor who was cited in the Bitcoin white paper. But the rest of the team is pretty underwhelming. If you go on LinkedIn and scroll through their profiles, you'll see a ton of junior developers filling in the rest of their team. And those are the ones who are working on the code base and updating their GitHub. Definitely does not inspire confidence in me compared to some of the other teams in the space like Avalanche, Solana, etc., who have world-class programmers and computer scientists working on their code base. Heck, even Internet Computer and Cardano have better talent top to bottom in my opinion. Now my final concern has to do with their lack of adoption. So far, they do not have many projects that we can actually use or try out. I mean, they have KDX, which is their decentralized exchange, but besides that, if you look at the other projects that their community brings up, it's mostly launchpads or NFT collections, and that's it. Where are all the top tier projects building on Kadena or migrating to it? So far, I haven't seen any, and that's concerning to me. Anyways, I know that's a lot of negatives, and I'm sure some of y'all will disagree with them. But on this channel, I always want to give my honest take, which is why I'm willing to put out these videos, even though I know I'll lose subscribers because of it. I do want to stay open-minded though. I don't have a grudge against Kadena at all. If they improve in the future, then I will gladly change my opinion. That's why you should write me in the comments below if you think I missed anything. Just FYI, I don't hide any comments myself, but YouTube's algorithm is super strict these days, so if you share some links or say some mean things, then they may auto-hide your comment. Just wanted to say that so you don't think that I'm censoring your posts. If you like this critique though, I have some other videos in this same format, like this one where I critique Cardano, or this one where I tear down my favorite former project IOTA. Anyways, I'm Kevin from Coinsider, can't wait to see you on the next one, and cheers!